Today I'm going to share with you a very personal story about how I got to go to college. This story involves my father, and if you remember in some of the earlier Thompson Talks, I talked about my father. My father worked very, very hard to support our family. Because my dad had a third grade education, there weren't a lot of options as to where he could find a decent job. So my father had to work in a foundry. Foundry is a place where you make parts to large tractors and things like that. It's a very hot place to work. It's a very dirty place to work. It's a dangerous place to work. In fact, in one accident, my father had one of his fingers cut off while at work. I really appreciated how hard he worked in that place to try to provide for us. Well, one day while he was working inside the foundry, one of the bosses came up to him and said, Arzell, don't you have a son that's a senior in high school? My dad said, yes, my son Milton is a senior in high school. And the boss said, well, the company just created a scholarship that will pay for all 4 years of a college education. And there's a meeting tonight, and I think you should go. Now, my dad worked long, hard hours and would come home completely exhausted. And he thought about not going, but then something on the inside told him that he had to go. So my father came home, showered, changed into different clothes, got dressed up, and went to the meeting. At the meeting, they talked about all of the things that, all of the requirements, all the forms that were necessary, the letters of recommendation, those kinds of things. When my father got home, he went over all of that with me. And then over the next few weeks, my father stayed on me to make sure that I would turn everything in on time. Well, after I turned in all the forms, what happened was this. I had worked at a Kohl's food store and saved quite a bit of money. And I was pretty much convinced that I'd end up going to college in Kenosha or in Racine, so close to home. So I had enough money saved up to go out and buy a Volkswagen Bug. And I took my father around, and I was on the verge of buying the Volkswagen Bug. And my father said, don't sign the deal. I believe that that scholarship's going to come through. Well, the very next day, I was at the house of a friend, and my mother called. And my mother called and she said, don't tell your father that I told you this, but you got the scholarship. And I started jumping up and down and screaming because this had been something that I had dreamed of doing, going to college, since about the time that I was 8 years old. Now she said, when your father gets home, act surprised. And so a few hours later I went home, my father comes through the door. He has tears running down his face because this was a dream for him too. And I said, oh, really, Dad? Really? So I was play acting like it was the first time that I heard the noise or the news, even though my mother had told me. Now, what makes this story one of the most precious stories to me is, first of all, my father was a dreamer, and my father had dreams for me and for my other brothers. And my father worked hard to help us fulfill those dreams. The other thing that makes this story sort of ironic is that a man with a third grade education would have the biggest role in one of his sons getting a college education. That's the story I wanted to share with you. Again, it's a very personal story. Though my father has passed away, when I was sitting down with one of my older brothers, he reminded me of my dad's role in my going to college. And I will never forget about it. It's a very special memory. Have a great day.